What's the best Pokemon mainline game on the Nintendo Switch? That's the question I'm answering in today's video. Now, before we begin, keep in mind this is my personal list built around my own experiences and enjoyment with each game. I won't be listing every single pro and con, and instead I'm focusing on what stood out to me for better or worse, and some of these picks might surprise you. So with this said, let's rank every mainline Pokemon game on the Nintendo Switch from worst to best. My story with Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl didn't start on the right note. I ordered the bundle version and it didn't arrive on time, so I cancelled it and just bought both versions on the spot with a special discount. My only time with the Sinnoh region was with Pokemon Pearl, so I never got to experience all the improvements available in Pokemon Platinum. So in my eyes, these games were an improvement in some way. The Sinnoh region was rebuilt in 3D and it looks great for a 1-to-1 remake. In this game, Pokemon follow you around, which I love seeing in any game, even if the execution is lacking a bit. They've also remade the Grand Underground to have roaming Pokemon in different biomes, and I've spent hours down there exploring and capturing every Pokemon I could before the Pokemon League, and even caught myself a Spirit Tomb. Although the Grand Underground feels more alive in the remakes, it costs almost any kind of social interaction. You can see players and walk around with them, but there is no meaningful way to interact with them. In the original games, you could play Capture the Flag and set traps to mess with other players, and even visit other people's secret bases, which was a returning feature from the previous generation. Secret bases still exist in Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, but all you can do in them is place Pokemon statues, which is a far cry from the customization we used to have. But the Grand Underground isn't the only new feature. We now have a brand new way of catching plenty of legendary Pokemon in the Ramanas Park, located on Route 221. Although you can catch 14 legendaries, unlocking them requires slates, and to get them, you'll need to dig for shards in the underground. This could have been a fantastic way of connecting these two features, but it's just boring. Very, very boring. These shards are rare, and after 30 minutes of no luck, I just gave up. Also, I already have multiple of these legendary Pokemons in Pokemon Home, so I definitely don't need 14 more. Mythical Pokemons, however, are a different topic. Pokemon Diamond and Pearl have several mythical Pokemon locked behind events, and unfortunately they are still locked in the remakes, unless you've purchased and played the game at a specific time or if you have a specific save file in your Nintendo Switch. Darkrai and Shaymin events were accessible through a distributed item for a few months, and the same goes for the Manaphy Egg. An Arceus can only be obtained by having a save file of Pokemon Legends Arceus in your system. Additionally, if you also have a save file of Pokemon Sword and Shield and Pokemon Let's Go, Eevee or Pikachu, you can obtain a Shirashi and a Mew respectively from an elderly couple. So as you can see, every time they add something new, there's something disappointing right behind it, and that's the major sentiment I share with the rest of the game. So many things could be improved but were left untouched in the name of being faithful to the original games. So faithful in fact that in the game released in 2022, TMs are still one-time use. Let that sink in. I can't discuss Pokemon Sword and Shield without immediately addressing its biggest controversy, the Dexit. For the first time in a new generation, not all Pokemon would be available in the National Pokédex. And although the DLC added more Pokemon, there were still 234 left out. But was it really that bad? I honestly didn't care much back then, and from a competitive standpoint, it was refreshing seeing other Pokemon in the spotlight. Although it was great seeing Metagross and Salamence back in the game again in the Crown Tundra. People use the Dexit argument to bash on these games, but there were far more reasons to criticize them, like the lack of exploration. Playing this game is like going through a bunch of hallways with an occasional path that leads to nothing interesting. It's true that you have more freedom in a wild area, but it can get boring pretty fast since there's nothing else to do other than catching roaming Pokemon and entering Max Dance. The DLC expands this concept, giving the player more interesting layouts that feel rewarding and exciting to explore, while also including NPCs throughout the area, making it feel like a true open world should be. But it's a shame that you need to dump $30 to play it, and if you don't spend the money, there won't be much to do after you beat the game, unfortunately. There's an epilogue, but it's too boring and I barely got through it the first time. You also have access to the Battle Tower, but it's too easy and shallow when comparing it to battle facilities from previous games. So, are there any pros? Of course there are, otherwise I wouldn't have spent more than 200 hours of my precious time with this game. First, the Max Dance and the Gigantamax form were great additions. One of my fondest memories of Pokemon Sword and Shield is playing next to my brothers on release day, roaming around the wild area searching and capturing a Gigantamax Butterfree. Of course, this led us to being completely overleveled for the rest of the game, which is a huge issue in itself, because Game Freak doesn't seem to know how to balance their games anymore. Also, Galar is a beautiful region, and it probably has the prettiest starting point of any game. It's just pure uncanny. It's not just a region, all the characters and new Pokemon have memorable designs and are filled with personality. Although the story could be better, it had a decent conclusion and character growth for the main cast. Both DLCs were great additions, especially Crown Thunder, which was my favorite, possibly because it features 2 new awesome Regis to capture and amazing Galarian forms for our favorite bird trio. The Dynamax Adventures was fun to play with friends as well, but I can't lie when I say that I was expecting more after seeing the initial concept art. But in the end, Pokemon Sword and Shield were a good starting point for what's to come, and we could see the vision they had for the wild areas finally in the next generation. I bet you weren't expecting to see Pokemon Scarlet and Violet in the 3rd spot, but relax and let me share my thoughts. As mentioned, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet is the true vision of the wild area of Pokemon Sword and Shield, and the result is a massive open world to explore, full of roaming Pokemon to capture, raid dance, and diverse locales that feel fun to explore. You can go anywhere you want after the prologue, and this sense of freedom in a Pokemon game is a dream come true, but not all is great. While you can technically go anywhere, not all places are immediately accessible. You first need to increase Koraidon and Miraidon's abilities by feeding them these special sandwiches. Also, an open world game means you can take on gym leaders in any order, but since there's no level scaling, it's easy to get over-leveled or under-leveled. With a huge Pokemon rule, many compromises had to be made. For the first time ever, it's not fun to walk around towns or speak with NPCs, and the low number of towns and cities make Paldea feel oddly small in scale. I used to believe that Pokemon regions were as massive as countries. Even in Sword and Shield, you could look at the horizon and dream beyond the borders. Paldea doesn't give you that illusion. There are exactly 12 towns and cities minutes apart. The other big compromise is visual fidelity and performance. The game still suffers from technical issues nearly 3 years after launch. I feel like patches could have fixed a lot, but Game Freak seemed more focused on selling DLC. And yes, I bought and complete them, but I had already fallen off the main game and had to push myself to finish them, which was a first for me with Pokemon games. Maybe I'm getting old, I don't know. But don't get me wrong, while I'm criticizing this game a lot, I've also played it for over 200 hours and loved most of it. When a new Pokemon game comes out, I tend to overlook flaws because this is my favorite franchise and I'm fully immersed in having fun. I loved carving my own path and capturing all the wonderful new Pokemon Paldea had to offer. The story and lore are among the best in the series, especially the mysteries of Area Zero and the terrestrialization phenomenon. Online battles were my endgame. It still baffles me that all the complicated mechanics for training a Pokemon like IVs, EVs, breeding, bottle caps, mains only matter in this online mode. There's still no challenge mode for players who love the battle facilities from older games. Nonetheless, even with all the bad, I still choose to play Scarlet and Violet over Sword and Shield any day. But the next games, they offer what I'm truly looking for in a Pokemon title. Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee belong in the 2nd spot because there is beauty in simplicity. They had the pleasure of being the first mainline Pokemon game on a home console, and the reception was not great. Everyone was anticipating the next generation, and instead they got what seemed like a spin-off developed to grab the attention of Pokemon Go players. There were no wild battles, and catching Pokemon involved throwing a Pokeball with motion controls. This was the most considerable change these games introduced, and the most controversial, being received with a mixed user experience. In my case, I remember having issues with the aiming, but I got better at it the more I played. Although playing handheld was always my preferred choice since I could avoid the motion controls entirely. One other aspect that fans disliked was the difficulty of the games. They were too easy due to various reasons. First, your Pokemon partner is completely busted. Not only are their stats higher than a regular Eevee and Pikachu, but they also have 31 IVs at every stat and have access to exclusive moves that can be used to solo the entire game. This is especially true for Eevee since it gets a move for each different evolution it has, giving it a wide type coverage. Then there are the candies, a mechanic that further trivializes every Pokemon battle. Each Pokemon you capture will give you a candy, which you can use to feed any Pokemon to increase individual stats. With this method, a measly Rattata can potentially surpass a Charizard in every stat, which sounds ridiculous but fun at the same time. If you see this mechanic as a way of giving a chance to the underdogs, then it's great, but give it to an already powerful Pokemon and the concept of challenge is completely removed. Despite all this, Pokemon Let's Go nails a couple of things that overshadow the bat, such as the visuals used to bring life to the Kanto region. In my most honest opinion, this is the best looking mainline Pokemon game on the Nintendo Switch, and it's not up to debate when you look at the competition. I played hundreds of hours of Pokemon Blue, Red and Yellow as a kid, and seeing Kanto in HD with Pokemon roaming around really warms my heart. For the first time, you can see Pokemon walking in tall grass, and even more surprisingly, you can see them at their actual size. No longer is an Onix or a Gyarados the size of a 10-year-old in a 3D Pokemon game. Not to mention, you can have Pokemon follow you and even ride a few of them in your journey, which is a dream come true for any Pokemon fan. Riding your bike might be cool, but have you tried tagging along the back of a shiny Rapidash? Shiny hunting is also the most accessible it's ever been. It was the first time when it didn't feel like a chore, and it's the game I spent the most hours doing it, and I caught so many I lost count. Although I got bored eventually since I'm not the most patient person in the world. Nostalgia might be speaking here, but Let's Go holds a special place in my heart. I've played and replayed it many times, and just the other day I introduced it to my daughter and she had an absolute blast catching Pokemon using the Pokeball Plus. It was her first time playing a Pokemon game, and because of this moment I was close to putting this game at number 1. But that place is reserved for a certain game you might know by now. Yes, Pokemon Legends Arceus is my favorite Pokemon game on the Nintendo Switch and the most refreshing title we've seen in years. It completely ditches the traditional gym-based structure and takes us to the Sinnoh region of many years ago, where Pokemon roamed free and were a threat to anyone who crossed their path. Although it's a linear game that follows a structured narrative, you have a lot of freedom while exploring the areas you progressively unlock. And as mentioned, Pokemon roam free with no wild encounters in tall grass. You see them in their natural habitats, behaving in different ways, although not on the same level as in Pokemon Snap. Some run away once they spot you, while others will try to kill you on sight, creating a sense of danger I'm not used to in a Pokemon game. Since Pokemon can directly attack you, you are in more control of the trainer than ever before. You can dodge, throw items to stun your foes, and even send your Pokemon to initiate a battle. But you don't need to start a battle to capture a Pokemon anymore, since you can aim and throw Pokeballs at any time, which is a first in the entire Pokemon series and why I love this game so much. Catching Pokemon is so satisfying, and when you capture a Pokemon, there's a flare that bursts from the Pokeballs to celebrate your achievement. Traversal is another area where the game shines. Riding Pokemon, from dashing across the plains with Warrior to gliding over valleys with Bravery, feels natural and smooth. You can swap between them on a fly, and this makes getting around a breeze. This, combined with the catching mechanics, provides fluid gameplay that it's difficult to put down. Combat, however, is where I found myself a bit conflicted. While it was nice to see Game Freak experiment with the agile and strong style, the new battle system didn't quite click for me. Still, I respect the effort to innovate, and in a game that already takes so many risks, it's difficult to be critical of one that didn't land perfectly for me. Boss battles are another highlight. There are actual action sequences that take some dexterity to overcome, since you need to keep alert and dodge incoming attacks and know when it's safe to attack, and they can be tough. especially Arceus, which took me several attempts before I finally took him down. There are also small but memorable side quests that bring warmth to the entire experience. One quest that stuck with me involved helping a man find his fill, which kept rolling down a hill. It was such a simple mission, but charming moments like this make Legends Arceus truly special. But of course, not everything about Legends Arceus is perfect. Visually, the game struggles, the textures are rough, the animations can be stiff, and the performance dips when there's too much happening on the screen. It's not as close as buggy as Pokémon Scarlet and Violet, but it still shows the limitations of not just the Switch, but also Game Freak. While most Pokémon can be caught through normal gameplay, Shaymin and Darkrai are locked behind save files from other games, which feels like an unnecessary barrier that's only there to make me spend more money on their games. Despite these shortcomings, Legends Arceus succeeds where it matters most. It feels like a true evolution of what a Pokemon game can be. It's immersive, challenging, and more importantly, it makes you feel like your actions have an impact in this world. And in the end, it left me wondering what other past Pokemon worlds could look like if given the same treatment. This isn't just a spin-off, it's a blueprint for the future of the franchise, and one I hope Game Freak continues to explore. Thank you so much for reaching the end. If you enjoyed the video, consider leaving a like and subscribing for more content in the future. Also, let me know if you agree with any of the placements and if you change anything in the comments below. Again, thanks for watching, and I'll be seeing you next time with brand new content.